Let's look at some of the more advanced or optional features in relation to purchasing and inbound logistics. Specifically, we'll talk about blanket purchase orders. We'll talk about returns to vendors and some additional tips on entering GRVs quickly. So starting first of all with the blanket purchase orders, we can create a commitment. So if you've made an agreement with one of your vendors that you're going to take a certain quantity of goods for a given lower price than normal, let's first of all specify the date before which we need to have completed the purchase. And then we want to record the item or items that are on special prices. So in this case, I'll just drop in that there's, let's say that we've committed to a quantity of 100 of these. We'd normally be buying them at $60, but we've negotiated a price of $58.50, provided we reach the commitment. So that's all you need to do in order to create the actual blanket order number. So behind the scenes, I confirmed the status of the blanket purchase order. We'll go ahead and actually draw down on the commitment that we've just created. If we drop in the vendor details, on the references, we can pull in any of the open blanket orders. So in this case, there's just the one blanket order. And we can also identify the part. We can mix that in with parts that aren't part of the blanket order as well. And you'll notice that the price that we set, $58.50, is the default. But when we indicate that we're below the purchasing threshold, it'll for the moment put the price back to $60. And if we then go ahead and minor point, we're in a leap year. So once we've then set the order item to be pulled down from the blanket PO, we might have a couple of other things that we want to check at the same time. We can check the part availability. So this shows not just the quantity in inventory, but also the values in open purchase orders, sales orders yet to be delivered, the projected inventory as a result. So I can get a very clear picture of my future inventory as well as my current inventory. I might also want to look at just a multi-locational view of that inventory to see where everything is. And I might want to pick up other quotations for this part, but the most interesting thing at this point is possibly to check the price options. So this is showing the various ways that we've had prices on this part, and so you can see there the blanket order at $58.50. So now that we've finished working with our purchase order, we want to go ahead and set the status to send, and we can pick up the order number for the goods receipt. So if we go into the GRV, you'll have noticed in the earlier video how you mainly handle the GRV. But at any point, you can specify some additional pointers. So if we set today's date and pick up the general vendor in this case, not the electronic vendor. Let's pick the general vendor. And we specify a due date of, let's say, yesterday, then the result of that is that when we pick up a given PO, then depending on what items are in that purchase order and their due dates, it will only enter into the received items the items that have due dates that have not passed this due date. So it's actually going to filter your PO. You can override it, but by default it will filter your PO just for the items that were expected to be received by today's date. The next thing is that if you simply received things as expected, you don't have to manually fill in the quantities, you just have to set the approve checkbox, and that will automatically set the quantities. The first thing I want to do in relation to one of these parts is check which sales orders we'll be able to deal with as a result of receiving those parts. And there's a very useful subform which is the open sales orders for the part, and that shows in this case the sales order that was placed for 5 of the items. Next thing I might want to do is perform a quality control check. You can create any number of different testing methods and results and the expected consequences of results. In this case, I've got a very simple quality control check, which we're going to perform by way of a site check, and we've got a grading system where we can mark them 1, 2, or 3. So if I mark this as 2, it's automatically put this into a secondary quality control check. It is acceptable, but it needs a secondary check. If we go back and test the other item, and then go into the results of this and perform the same kind of receipting quality check with the site methodology, but in this case specify that it's quality 1, you'll notice in relation to this that it's automatically marked as acceptable. Quality 3 in the values that I've set here would automatically record it as unacceptable. And you can link that to whether you're going to accept the payable from the vendor as a result as well. Again, we'll set our status to final so that all those changes actually take effect. So the next thing is that there is within the inventory purchase transactions the ability to do a return to a vendor. And so in this case, if we decide that we do actually want to send it back, just as with the GRV, we're putting in the reference in order to bring this in. Same in relation to the return. We just need to copy in the GRV. That will bring in any other reference details that we want. And in relation to the returned items, it will offer us both of the items that we worked with. We can simply delete any of these rows or leave them as 0, and we can use the approved quantities checkbox to auto indicate that we are returning the total quantity, which will then update to 10. If you're running low for any given item, whether it's an inventory item or not, you can create a purchasing demand to alert purchasing that a particular item needs to be bought. So you can specify when you want the item, or when the demand is actually being made. You can link it to a given vendor if that's relevant. And if all the items are going to go to an individual warehouse, then specify that. And same is true of a bin if necessary. You can drop in your department code. You can drop in your user code. And you can specify a demand type. I'll specify the general replenishment code. Excuse me, this is the demand type is office supplies. The reason code is a general replenishment. So that's the basis on which you create the core demand, and then you just specify which part or parts is actually going to be required. So if we need some paper and possibly also some spiral notebooks, then we'll drop in the demand and specify the quantity that actually needs ordering, and the date on which we require the items to be delivered. And that's all you need to do in order to save the purchase demand. You'll notice that we can create a purchase order from the direct activations menu. That will be typically the purchasers that will come along, and based on the authorization of the purchase demands, which will work through the standard statuses, the standard BPM from draft to authorized. They'll then go ahead and actually raise the purchase orders from the purchase demands.